all the information that we have about feedback and what's important and what's not important. Um, we have four main points. It's constructive feedback, uh, classroom culture, the amount of feedback given, and barriers to feedback. So, constructive feedback. First of all, it needs to be interactive. There needs to be some sort of two-way communication so you can respond to the feedback you know, back and forth. And ideally, there should be some sort of audio or video so you can actually hear the emotion behind everything. It's there. Um, there needs to be good and bad feedback. There's professors out there that only focus on the negative, and it can result in bad morale, and it doesn't inform the students of what they're doing correctly. Um, there's formative feedback. The feedback needs to be cumulative, detailed, and there needs to be a summary at the end, and that's hard to read. Sorry. Um, this is because when it comes to feedback, content is everything, and if there's not good content, then the feedback itself is pretty much pointless. And if you have good content, students are more likely to go back and um, read the feedback in the future. Time and being able to review the feedback is key. It says ASAP under there, but it's white, so you can't see it. Basically, students need to be able to go back and review the feedback more than just once, so they can refer to it again in the future. And it needs to be fast. You need to get the feedback to students as soon as possible because then the information's still relevant, still fresh in their mind, and they can apply it easier. And there needs to be a clear vision. This basically means that you need a rubric or some sort of standards so students know what an A is and what a B is, and they know what to expect. And it can basically it can guide the student through the class, and it gives something for the professor to refer back to when they're giving the feedback. All right, what's next? Rubrics guidance. Classroom culture is the next main point. Part of having a good classroom culture is having real-world applications. It gives students relevant information. One example we had was beer in a fridge. You know what it was?
Yeah, Ed Wolfert in his podcast said he talked about having real world examples like beer in the fridge, so students tended to be more engaged when he used examples like beer.
So it'll create discussions, and students are actually interested. Let's see here. We need a safe environment so students feel safe giving feedback. There's a lot of students that don't like peer-to-peer feedback because they're feeling like they're putting someone down, or they're getting put down if the feedback is for them. So the professor needs to establish an environment so students feel safe to communicate. They also need to feel comfortable. It's kind of the same thing. It creates discussions, and it's basically an open forum, and it can result in good feedback. What's next? The professor needs to show interest. When they're giving feedback in the classroom, they need to hear the opinions of students and hear what they have to say, and it really makes students feel more comfortable. And classroom structure. Basically, the class needs to be set up in a way that allows interaction. Time for group discussions and things like that, and it needs to be structured in a way that um, allows for immediate feedback tools like daily quizzes and the clicker stuff that you do. Um, our next main point was the amount of feedback given. If there's too little, it's just kind of sidebar notes that no one pays attention to. It's not very helpful, and students don't tend to not take it seriously. Too much, it's just sugarcoating information. It's unnecessary, and students really don't want to take the time to read pages of feedback or listen to an hour podcast on feedback. It's just, students just don't want to do it. The perfect amount of feedback is it's in depth. It has positives and negatives, and there's kind of a stronger emphasis on the negatives because students want to know how to improve. Our last main point is barriers to feedback. The first barrier is a large classroom for a couple different reasons. The first was that it kind of creates a bad classroom environment. It's usually big lecture halls where it's just professors lecturing and discussions don't take place and there's no peer-to-peer feedback. Also, a professor can't take the time outside of class to respond to individual students all the time. If there's 100 students in a class, they just don't have the time for it. And that brings us to our next point, which is time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes there's just not enough time for professors to respond to everyone personally. So if there's ways to help professors out on time need to be made, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. An unclear vision, no rubric, no expectations or anything like that can hurt feedback because it doesn't give professors anything to refer back to, and students just don't know what to expect. The next is tracking down the professor. Some students have had a hard time getting to a professor's office hours, or a professor won't respond, and that clouds feedback a lot because we've seen that everybody likes face-to-face feedback, and that usually takes place at a professor's office hours, and if you can't track down your professor, it's not going to happen. Our next is old school professors. Professors that just stand up there and lecture. They don't use technology at all. It's just a straight grade. They don't tell you what you're doing wrong. Just the old school, typical professor that you would think of back in the day, I guess. And our last barrier to feedback is unmotivated students. If students don't come to class or don't pay attention in class, discussions don't happen, it doesn't get as personal, and it's unmotivated students just don't take feedback. They don't like it, they don't pay attention to it, they'll ignore it, and it makes feedback pointless. So all of these things, they connect with each other. Time can relate to a bunch of things. There's more connections that still need to be made, but this is what we have right now. So there it is.